Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video today I want to talk about the fear of solo wild camping. The reason I decided to make this video was I've been posting my trips on various forums and Facebook pages, and very often people say to me, you know, how are you brave enough to go on your own, or aren't you frightened on your own? And the answer was yes, I was at first, and in fact I put off doing this for a long time because of that. But I eventually realised that I was really limiting my experience of life by fears that were actually ungrounded, irrational, and probably were unlikely to happen. And I decided that I'd rather take these small risks but take them in a calculated way, so I'd done my best to make sure everything would go okay, although obviously once you're out there anything can happen. And I got out there and I did it. So I just thought it might be useful to you all if I share how I managed to get myself out onto my first solo wild camp. First of all, I'd say it's actually quite normal, I think, that we all feel more vulnerable when there's only this thin sheet between us and the world, as opposed to having a roof over our heads. But there's so much joy and inner peace to be had from getting out there wild camping. If this is your thing, I'd honestly encourage you to find a way to get out there and give it a go. So the thing to ask yourself is, what are you afraid of? And I'm thinking we're probably afraid of one or more of 3 or 4 things. One of these things could be animals. Here in the UK, animals will rarely approach your tent. Now, when you're choosing where to pitch, don't pitch in a field that's had animals in, cows, sheep, something like that, which is obvious. Just look at the ground and you'll be able to tell if they've been there in the day. So you're going to want to choose somewhere in the first place that, as far as you know, there's not that many animals around. Another thing that you may be very apprehensive about is wild weather. You know, what if you're out there and there's a storm and your tent starts to unpeg and flap about? Well, obviously we have lots of ways now, and quite accurate ways, of checking weather on our computer and also when we're out and about on our phones. So it's less and less likely you're going to be caught out, totally out of the blue, by really bad weather. Another thing that concerns us is noises in the night. Now, I'm going to talk about this one later, so I'll just leave that one there for now. And then there's people. Now, there are rational fears that we might actually get caught out whilst we're camping, and I have got another video all about how you can really reduce the likelihood of that happening. And then there are our irrational fears of things like mad axe murderers and stuff like that. But honestly, anyone who is intent on causing harm is highly unlikely to be wandering about in the great outdoors. And of course we have our overactive imaginations that run wild when it becomes dark, and we think of things like ghosts and vampires and spirits and all sorts of things. Again, they're irrational. And the only way you can really overcome all these fears is by getting out there and doing it. And that's what this video is all about. I'm going to tell you how you can get from where you are now to your first solo wild camp. Now, what I'm going to recommend is that you do this gradually and you take a staged approach to getting towards your first wild camp. So the first thing, if you're actually new to camping altogether and not just new to solo wild camping, then I would definitely recommend that you set up in your garden. And this is a great thing that we can all practice in lockdown. I found it really useful to set up in my garden. I did it 3 or 4 times in different weathers, and it really helped me to practice pitching my tent when it was really raining and windy, and I learned the most efficient way for me to do that. And also, of course, it gives you a great chance to test out all your gear to make sure that your mat is sufficiently warm for the winter, your sleeping bag's going to be up to the job, and everything else you're going to take with you. So first off, set up in your garden several times. The next thing, and this is a biggie, is familiarise yourself with all the noises that you think you may encounter out there. So when you're out in your garden doing your practice camps, that's the good time to familiarise yourself with the physical noises, such as the rain on your tent, the grass rustling against the side of your tent, which actually can sound really loud and quite eerie, and things like leaves falling on your tent will sound very loud, and the wind I've been convinced many times I could hear voices in the wind, so that's a good time to practice listening out for all those things, and you get to know what they are. Another thing I always do, it's a bit of a reassurance measure really, and you've probably noticed it while I've been doing this video. I wrap my head torch around my wrist when I go into my sleeping bag at night, so I don't have to scrabble around to find a light if I want to see what's outside or I want to do anything really. So I've found this to be a really useful thing to do, to just pop my head torch onto my wrist. And then of course there are the animal noises. Now in the UK, the things you're most likely to hear at night time would be badgers, foxes, deer, owls, hedgehogs, things like that. And if you can get used to what these things sound like, and I will admit some of them are quite alarming, then it will help you enormously. The two things I've heard most when I've been out camping have been a tawny owl and a fox. And I have a listen, if you listen here. So this one's the tawny owl. It's really rather lovely to lie in your tent and listen to that. I had one that was in a tree right next to my tent on my very last multi-day solo, and oh, it was just beautiful lying there listening to that. So that's the tawny owl. Now the next one, which is the most alarming one I would think of everything you could hear, is the fox, because it does tend to be a bit like a human scream. Don't let that put you off, but here's the fox. See what I mean? But I mean, once you know what it is, and you can think, that's a fox, that's a badger, then your fears will definitely diminish. One of the loudest things I heard early in the morning, very early in the morning, was incredibly loud snuffling just outside the door of my tent, and it turned out to be a hedgehog. And when hedgehogs are looking for food, they make this snuffling noise, and it is incredibly loud when you're in your tent. But as I said, if you know this and you're familiar with it, then there's nothing to be afraid of. It's a hedgehog. I've just played you the tawny owl and the red fox, which is common if you're out and about here in the UK. But, you know, if you just do a Google and find out which animals you're likely to hear in the night when you're camping, then you can go online and download, and there are loads and loads of audio clips online for you to listen to the sounds that they're likely to make. So basically what I'm saying is it's all experience. Once you get used to these sounds and you know what they are, then you'll definitely find that your fears start to drop off. Now the next thing I'm going to recommend, once you've done your garden camps, is that you book yourself on a campsite. Don't wild camp on your first time out. Book yourself on a campsite, somewhere where you can take your car and have your car fairly close to your tent. So this is the next step. You're not near your home, so you can't just go indoors, but you've got your car close by, so you are gradually moving away from home, and less and less comforts around you as you go out there. So that would be my second recommendation. Something else you can do, there are a few campsites now that classify themselves as almost wild. So basically they have much less facilities, maybe only a cold water tap. So if you can then find one of those to go on, you're getting closer and closer to that experience. Moving on then, another thing you can do is, if it's possible for you, I appreciate it may not be, but if from where you live there is a campsite sort of a mile or so away, then you could walk from your home and camp there. So in this scenario, you've taken your car away and it's just you and your tent and your backpack and you're going off. It may not be possible. I can do that here because I've got 2 or 3 campsites which are about 2 miles from my house, and that's what I did. Well, I think you're almost ready now. So you've tested out your gear in the garden, you've got used to it, you've been out a few times, you know the noises you're likely to hear, you know what the leaves and the grass and the rain and the wind sound like around your tent, and all the animal noises you're likely to hear. It's time for you to have a go. So choose your spot carefully, make sure you take a phone and a battery pack so you always are in contact. Let someone know where you're going and go out and do your first wild camp. And let me know in the comments below when you've done that and how you found it. I'm dying to know how you all get on. and honestly, you won't regret it. It is absolutely a fantastic experience. It's so calming, it's fantastic for your mental health, it makes you confident, it makes you feel you can take on things. It just has such a knock-on effect in all areas of your life. Go out there, have fun, and let me know how you get on.